So after 13 years of amenorrhea, I am finally a woman and I got my period back at age 29. So I share my story today in hopes of inspiring and encouraging you guys that healing really is possible. It's just going to take some time and patience. So in today's video, I'm going to share my amenorrhea health journey and then also share the steps that I took to get my period back. All right, so April 2020, my sister Sarah and I committed to finally fixing and healing our hormones. So it's been about 20 months of dedicating my health nutrition strategy to getting my period back. So it took about 20 full months for the period to return. However, it was years and years of improper fueling myself and other activities that led to my amenorrhea. So like I mentioned, I've had amenorrhea for 13 years. I got my first menstrual period when I was 16 years old. When I was young, I was really athletic, so I played a ton of sports, and then come high school, I knew that I wanted to play in college, so I really had to specialize. And sports and school ran my life. I did whatever I could to be the best athlete possible. And that involved healthy eating. So obviously in those 13 years, the idea of what health is, healthy eating, has certainly evolved as I've learned more and more. But at the time, I was never really extreme, meaning anorexia or bulimia. I just never knew how to properly fuel and nourish myself while I was expending a lot of energy due to all the athletic things that I was doing. So in high school, I played a lot of golf. I traveled a ton for it, and I also worked out a lot on my own. And while I was in high school, I started to really get obsessed with this idea of having a six-pack 365. Shredded 365. You gotta show your six-pack, your core. So I really got obsessed with that idea back then. And I really wish someone would have sat me down and talked to me about how one should properly fuel oneself, and that what being healthy truly meant, which involves, for a female, having a menstrual cycle, having proper hormones, because then you can recover better, you can perform your sport better, you can sleep better. Our bodies are not going to thrive and live optimally without proper functioning hormones. So I thought that healthy was eating brown rice, whole grain bread, whole grain pasta, chicken breast, and broccoli, and being super lean. And those were things I could check off my to-do list. I got my workout in, I am eating healthy, and yeah, I thought that I was doing what was best at the time. However, I got one period, so 6-ish days, and then it never returned. So I played golf in college as well. I was a varsity athlete, and I did mechanical engineering in college, and that was extremely challenging. That put a lot of stress on me in a number of ways, and so I was certainly expending a lot of energy in college, and again, not properly fueling or nourishing myself. So just never eating enough for all of my activities. And so throughout that time, my parents had me go see a number of endocrinologists, and the only solution was putting me on birth control to get my period. But that's not your natural period. You don't ovulate that way. Your hormones are not optimal that way. But thankfully, I was never good at taking pills. And so I was going on and off those birth control pills. For example, I would do them for 2 months and then just not do anything for 2 years. So I went a very long period of time without menstruating, without bleeding. And for women, menstruating is our body's natural way of detoxing iron and other things. And so over the course of that time, I really think that I had like a ton of stored iron in my tissues, because again, a blood test for your iron is not fully representative of the iron that could be stored in your tissues. So I was also prescribed a lot of iron pills, but again, thankfully I was not good at taking any of those. So I kind of just like didn't do anything about my period for a long period of time. I just avoided it, and doctors and other people told me that it's not like the biggest deal if you don't have your period, and you can still find other ways to get pregnant. And now at age, I learned this more at like age 26, 27, that having your menstrual period is really, really important for optimal health and longevity and properly functioning systems in our body. And so I was doing myself a disservice. So after undergrad, I went to graduate school, and I kind of put my golf clubs away for a little bit. I needed some time away after 12 years of competitive golf, and I got into powerlifting. So my sister Sarah and I got really into powerlifting.
Pull. Come on, up.
And we got into like the if it fits your macros, and like eating a bunch of cereal and Pop-Tarts because they fit our macros, and we were never really told like about bioavailable nutrients and things like that. So again, I finally learned to eat more and properly fueling my workouts, but I wasn't giving myself the most bioavailable nutrients, and I was actually really plant-based, cooking plants the wrong way, eating a bunch of really inflammatory foods, and then enter some like autoimmune conditions. And that's when Sarah and I started getting into fasting, and then eventually keto, and then eventually carnivore. And so there was a period of quite a few years where I was doing a lot of strength training, a lot of fasting, zero carb. And I think that all of those just were digging myself deeper and deeper into this stress hole that I dug myself into starting at age like 14 or 15, when I wasn't fueling myself enough for workouts. So I think just my biggest trend in my amenorrhea journey is just admitting that I was orthorexic. So I was obsessed with being healthy. Literally, it took over my life. And I kind of lost the ability to just live life, and instead felt like I needed to control it and control being healthy. But unfortunately, my view and definition of health, which was working out a ton, having a six-pack, and eating like whole grains, chicken breast, and broccoli, that was very skewed by like a lot of like media, magazines, and things like that. So like my definition of health was wrong, and that definitely led to a lot of health consequences. So like I said, Sarah and I committed to finally fixing our hormones April 2020. Prior to that, I just was brushing my lack of menstrual period and my hormone problems under the rug with, I will deal with this at some later time. And then we finally said, okay, let's commit to finally getting our periods back. So like I mentioned, I'm going to share the approach that I took to get my period back, but I think it's important to just have the right frame of mind when you are heading down a amenorrhea or just a general healing journey. And that is to give yourself the patience and acceptance that you deserve, to understand that it is going to take a while. You didn't get to where you are now in just one night, 1 week, 1 month, or even sometimes a year. It's going to take a long time to reverse some of the problems that you've built up from over the year. And also, don't get hard on yourself, because like social media and like these skewed, really thin models and all of these other targets of like what is healthy and what is women these days are so skewed. And so never be hard on yourself for making these mistakes when you are kind of set up for failure given all of the mainstream bombarding craziness that now is like women. It's funny that like 1950s women had curves and like had a good amount of body fat, and now you look at magazines and like the women are like stick figures, and like that's not attractive. It's not. So give yourself that acceptance, that patience, and really head into this journey knowing that it's going to take a while. And given that, commit to it. So don't bounce around to other things. Commit, give yourself 100% chance in achieving what you want by committing to your goal and committing to the path that you've chosen. Because so many people, you're going to receive advice from every direction, and a lot of them are going to conflict. And that can be really hard mentally, not knowing what to do and trying a bunch of different things. But I guarantee you, trying a bunch of different things that may conflict each other is not going to get you further. Instead, find an approach that you trust, you believe in, you've seen other people succeed with it, and move forward with that. And then also know that there is no single supplement or quick fix that is going to cure you. Like I said earlier, I'm really not the best at taking supplements. So in these 20 months of healing my amenorrhea, I would go on and off certain things. Like I think some things that can be helpful would be like vitamin E or like some B complex, B vitamins, or like bioidentical progesterone. But I never stuck with those for a really long time. I went on and off things. I think the most important thing for amenorrhea and healing your hormones is nourishing yourself and understanding that our body requires fuel to digest food, to think, to talk to people, to get work done, to go on walks, to work out. Every aspect of our physiology requires energy. And so for healing amenorrhea, you really need to focus on properly nourishing and fueling yourself. That should be number one focus. And then I, of course, took like a slightly different path than probably most people in like healing amenorrhea. And I'll get into some of the specifics and details there, but you need to take off the hat of restriction and put on the hat of nourishment, loving yourself, fueling yourself, because restricting didn't work. Restricting is what got you here. That clearly didn't work. Nourishing yourself, telling your body that it's safe. So your body is not going to want to produce a baby when it's deprived of nutrients and fuel. Your body needs to feel safe to be able to fix hormones, especially after such a long period of time like myself. And so I think having that mentality on fully nourishing yourself is really important. All right, mentality tip number 2 is trusting the process and letting go. So not living day to day worrying about it, instead putting in the work, making those habit changes, nourishing yourself, but letting yourself live. Rather than labeling yourself as I have a problem and you hyperfixate on it and you're constantly looking up what to do for it, instead lay down your fundamentals, nourish yourself, and live your life. Don't let this define you. I think that I started to get really good at that when we moved out to the farm, because I almost had the farm and the animals to like distract me. And I already had those habits of fully nourishing myself every few hours, eating enough, and I had those healthy habits established. And then I just went and lived my life and was farming. And I think that really helped me in kind of letting go, letting like another stress load go. All right, so now I'm gonna get into more of the specifics on the approach that I took towards healing my hormones and getting my period back. So I did a lot of research, looked into different strategies and implementations out there on how to get your period back. And then this is what I decided to do. It's kind of a blend of the work of like 3 individuals. So 1, Dr. Ray Peat, I definitely took a pro-metabolic, bioenergetic approach to my nutrition strategy. I also implemented some principles of Morley Robbins with blood donations and things like that. And then also implemented some of the work of Dr. Katarina Dalton, who cured a lot of women's hormones by having them eat every few hours with a balanced meal. And the carbs in that meal contain some sugars and some starches. So I'll get into each three of those, but that's kind of the summary of the individual's work that I combined into my own kind of healing amenorrhea journey. All right, so for the Dr. Ray Peat bioenergetic pro-metabolic principles, fueling myself every 2 to 4 hours, so not letting myself enter any fasting. There's actually quite a bit of research out there showing that excessive fasting can lead to a lot of hormonal problems for women. So I ate every 2 to 4 hours depending on what I was doing out on the farm and how hungry I was. And then each time I ate, I made sure that I consumed balanced meals. So at the very least, carbs and protein, and then at least a little bit of fat, and that fat was saturated fat. So carbs and protein to make sure that I regulate my blood sugar, and then nourishing fats for the fat soluble vitamins and things like that. So for the carbs, I focused in the beginning more on like easy to digest carbohydrates. So fruit juices, honey, things like that, because my digestion was pretty poor in the beginning. And then over time, like I mentioned, Dr. Katarina Dalton, she talks about the importance of starches. So like potatoes, rice, sweet potatoes, more starchier carbs as opposed to fruit, and how those can actually be really important for a woman to get her period back. It helps just signal that like you are in safety mode, you have plenty of energy. So as my digestion improved, I incorporated more starches near the end. So I added in white rice and then well-cooked potatoes and well-cooked sweet potatoes. So for a meal, for example, I would have my carb sources, which would be some little bit of starch and then some fruits. So I would balance out those two carbs, and then a bioavailable protein source, an animal protein, such as beef shanks, one of my favorites. And then a little bit of animal saturated fat, for example, like butter. But yeah, consuming balanced meals or snacks every 2 to 4 hours, I think was really important to let my body know it's constantly getting fuel, so it is safe. It's okay. It's getting me out of that fight or flight response. And I did not take like an all-in approach like some women do for healing their hormones. And if that's what works for someone, that's great. I was really particular with my food choices and really focusing on improving my metabolism, the state of my metabolism, by ensuring that I was consuming easy to digest carb sources, reducing consumption of PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, which can interfere with energy production, and then bioavailable protein sources. So those kind of the focus that I took. I didn't go all in and just have a bunch of like Reese's peanut butter cups and cereal and things like that. I wanted to be a little bit more strategic and make sure that I was giving my body the tools, vitamins, and minerals that it needed to restore proper energy metabolism and get my period back. And so the way that I gauged whether things were working for me was using body temperature. And so just making sure that my body temperature was rising after meals and also staying relatively high when I woke up. So at the start of my healing amenorrhea journey, I had really low body temps, and that is indicative of poor thyroid health, low metabolism. And then now my body temps are consistently high, and then after meals they raise, which is a good sign. It's a sign that that meal was metabolically supportive for me. So that's kind of the approach that I took for nutrition. It did take a lot of work. Fueling yourself with really nutrient dense foods every couple of hours it's a part-time job. It's a full-time job. It required a lot of meal prep. But I always had that lens, that focus of I need to nourish myself. and this is my current goal, and I want to give 100% to my goal. And so nourishing myself every couple of hours required a lot of meal prep, a lot of planning, but I think that it was certainly worth it. All right, and then another habit that I implemented was regular blood donations and not taking iron pills. So this is largely the work of Morley Robbins, and we have a great interview with Morley Robbins where he reviewed my full Monty iron panel last summer. So I definitely recommend checking out that video for some more information on why he thinks low hemoglobin, so anemia, is not an iron problem, like a low iron problem. It's more of an iron dysregulation problem. So if you think about it, 13 years of no period, 13 years of eating iron-rich foods. I've still included animal products. The amount has definitely fluctuated throughout the years. And like I mentioned earlier, the female menstrual cycle is our body's natural way of reducing, detoxing iron. So how could it be that I was low on iron? It doesn't really make sense. And so our bodies can push iron into our tissues, can store iron, and that doesn't come up on blood work. And so Morley Robbins wanted me to donate blood as regularly as I could. So that's like every 56 days or so. And that's to help get your iron recycling system back working. And so to get that iron regulation system back working, that requires donating blood. It requires consuming bioavailable copper sources. So that is like liver, oysters, and shellfish, and things like that. And then also making sure that you consume retinol, so bioavailable preformed vitamin A. Both bioavailable copper and retinol are required to get that iron recycling system going properly. So I consume beef liver pretty much every single day in these last 20 months. Beef liver is very rich in bioavailable copper and retinol. So it is a great food to regularly include. I had about 1.5 ounces for breakfast every single day. All right, and in terms of exercise, I definitely had to change my approach to working out. So before this, I was working out like 4 to 6 times a week, fasted, and doing very heavy strength training. So I did more of like a power building approach where I would do like a heavy main movement like squats, bench, or deadlift, and then I would do bodybuilding accessories after that, all fasted. So could not do that anymore because that is literally sending not the right signals to your body in times of healing hormones. I don't think that I will ever go back to fasted training after learning about all of these things, but I didn't entirely, I didn't stop working out. So I know a lot of people say to stop working out, but that just didn't settle well with me. But I worked out smarter. So I did not work out harder, I worked out smarter. And on days where I had a lot of farm chores out here, did not work out. And working out was certainly not a priority. When things were really stressful, like for example, moving in and out of this house multiple times, there was like 6 weeks in a row that I didn't work out at all. And I think changing your mindset on working out, especially from someone who has orthorexia, where they have to work out to be healthy. And that's not the case, because for someone who's having metabolism, thyroid issues, for someone who doesn't have a proper period or good hormones, working out can actually cause worse problems. It can make your hormone issues worse. It's not benefiting you necessarily if you're working out harder. And so the approach that I took was doing about 2 to 3 workouts a week that were like 20 minutes long. And so that looked like 2 to 3 exercises. So it was much more of movement sessions, like I called them on our Instagram stories, than workouts. So I went from doing like 2-hour workouts 4 to 6 days a week to let's work out 2 to 3 times a week, maybe. If not, that's okay. And just doing more mind muscle connection. So it was much more like muscle maintenance and more just general movement to get blood flow than, okay, I'm going to maximize muscle building right now. And so I think your lens and your framework on how you view workouts has to change. It's not we're maximizing muscle growth. It's not we're burning fat. It's let's move in a way that gets blood flow and improves our health. And a really easy way to determine whether you're doing too much is by using your waking body temperature. So if your waking body temperature drops down a day after your workout, then you know that that workout was a little bit too much. So I think it really also depends on where you were prior to this healing hormone journey. Like if you didn't work out at all, then don't add in working out. I have been strength training for like 10, 15 years. I was doing it a lot. So it's much more of a functional, like healthy movement than working out. I wouldn't even call it working out. I would say, let's go move our body a little bit. So that's important. Doing things that you enjoy, makes you smile, makes you happy, not hyperventilate and sweat a ton. And so as a result of all of these changes that I implemented, I did gain a little bit of weight. Especially in the beginning, because my body was so deprived before. I was fasting a ton, I was eating 0 carb, and then adding in carbohydrates. My body didn't really know what to do with the carbs at first, and so I definitely gained more weight in the first summer, so summer 2020. But then my weight really like leveled off, and I actually think I kind of lost some weight this summer unintentionally. I wouldn't say I lost weight. I would say that my body started to redistribute. I started to become a woman. I went from that infant toddler where, okay, let's talk about the phases. So like a really thin girl who doesn't have proper functioning hormones, really like you can see her core, starts gaining weight. They're gonna gain it in areas that are really important to the body, like for example, our organs and our female organs. So you're gonna gain fat in the middle, and that's your body being smart, protecting those organs. So you go from really thin to like adult toddler, where you start to just have a little pudge there, and it's okay. Respect yourself during this journey. And then when your hormones start to re-regulate, your body like moves the fat around where it's supposed to be. And I definitely went through that entire phase. And it was certainly tough mentally, it really was. But I think keeping your mind on the end goal and knowing that in a year or however long it takes you, you will be in a much better, healthier place, and your body will redistribute. And especially from someone who is orthorexic, gaining fat can be really hard mentally because you think you're going backwards in your health. And you also think that like everyone's looking at you and like people are gonna be like, oh my God, she's like let herself go. But people don't care. People, your friends, your family, they care about how you treat them, your personality, if you make them smile, if you make them laugh. They don't care what you look like. They really don't. And so letting go of that peer pressure to look a certain way, monumental, transformative, super important in this journey. And have a support system that can really help you do that. So yes, I did gain weight relative to this body, but I recognized that this body, this physique, did not work. It did not let me have my period. I was not optimal. I was not in a healthy place because I didn't have a proper period. I didn't have proper functioning hormones. So yes, I gained weight. I didn't gain a ton of weight, and I think that that's because I was really focusing on like nutrient-rich foods. I didn't really take the all in and eat a bunch of junk food. I don't think that that's necessary because that can lead to future health problems down the line. So I definitely took a little bit more of like a structured approach, and I plan to do a Q&A at some point soon, so start thinking of questions for me and how I regain my period. All right, I'm gonna wrap up with one final mindset note, because this is a long, tough journey. It really is. Can be certainly mentally challenging because it's kind of opposite of everything else you've done throughout your life. But remember, what you were doing before wasn't working. So I ask you to use this time to love and appreciate yourself more than you ever have before. So start recognizing like all the amazing things you have going for you, all of your blessings, all of your talents outside of your physical appearance, because you are so much more than the amount of body fat you have on you. Nourishing yourself is loving yourself. It really is. Giving your body the tools and nutrients that it needs so that you can be at your best health. So I think changing your mindset from like restricting and trying to be super thin to loving and nourishing myself along every step of the way. So that about wraps up today's video. Until next time, make sure you're behaving like an angel.